All right, Shalom. I want to start off by giving all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh Bahashum, Yahweh Shai, Bahashum Rakakwadash. I want to give the honors to our apostles and elders of Great Millstone who rule well, and grace and peace to you elect around the four winds, believing and pushing this truth in all sincerity. May the blessing of election be upon your houses. This is your fellow servant, Rakoyer from the GMS Orlando camp, coming at you with another impromptu lesson. And tonight, I wanted to get into a lesson on the makings of a leader. Because through the Spirit, we're all being groomed for leadership. And a huge part of that grooming process is coming through experience. The different experiences that the Lord is allowing us to gain in our daily walks through trials, tribulations, obstacles, and so on and so forth. The Lord is allowing us to gain an experience, which is a part of the makings of a leader, a true leader. And I caught this excerpt from the Jocko Willick podcast that I want to get into. Lord, when this is edifying unto you elect, we're going to play a few minutes of it. We're going to grab a couple of precepts. Lord, when this is edifying.
This is what I'm carrying. So how old are you? Doesn't matter, because this is what we're doing. Fast forward. I don't think I need to expitate for long on the moral qualities of a leader. No amount of study or learning will make a man a leader unless he has the natural qualities of one.
And that's a true statement. There's no amount of studying or learning that one can do to take on a leadership position, let alone sustain that leadership position. The position of a leader is one that's preordained and predestined. All right, just like men like Moses, Jeremiah, Jonah, Yahushua. All right, the position of a leader is preordained and predestined. And that leader is formed from the womb. All right, let's get that in Jeremiah. I believe it's chapter 1. Let me just search it up. This is Jeremiah chapter 1 in verse 4. It says, "Then the word of the Lord came unto me, saying, Before I formed thee in the belly, I knew thee. And before thou camest forth out of the womb, I sanctified thee, and I ordained thee a prophet unto the nations." And we understand that prophets are really essentially the leaders of a nation, because the prophets have the vision from the Most High. All right, the prophets have a connection, with the Heavenly Father through His only begotten Son. So the prophets are the leaders of a nation. And that's exactly what the Lord is resurrecting here in these latter days. The Lord is resurrecting the leaders of Israel. All right, when you go into Isaiah, the first chapter, the Lord said that He would restore the judges as at the first. This is Isaiah 1 and verse 26. It says, "And I will restore thy judges as at the first, and thy counselors as at the beginning. Afterward thou shalt be called the ruler of the city. Afterward thou shalt be called the city of righteousness, the faithful city." All right, so the Lord is resurrecting the judges as at the first. All right, the men, the gates of Israel. All right, the leadership of the nation of Israel. All right, and that position was formed from the womb. All right, there's no amount of studying or learning that you can do to overtake that position. And we see that evident, within men like this guy, Adam Abbott, a few years ago, who was essentially a living thesaurus when it came to precepts. But all that learning and studying that he did, couldn't amount to the office that the Lord has ordained for our elders and apostles. Likewise, this guy, Eleazar, all right, the head of the formerly Sakari, all right, he was known for being, a researcher, a studier. But all that studying amounted to nothing. He amounted to a leadership position for a time and period, but he couldn't sustain it because it wasn't of the spirit of Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushai. And he didn't go through the experience that it takes to form a true leader. You take men like Moses, for example. You know, Moses was formed, into a leader through experience. Likewise, Jonah. Likewise, Jeremiah. Likewise, Yahushua. Yahushua was formed to be the king. And he went through the experience that it takes to be a good leader. He's the forerunner of our journeys in this lifetime. But I'm gonna rerun that.
Moral qualities of a leader. No amount of study or learning will make a man a leader unless he has the natural qualities of one.
Right. And those natural qualities are drawn out through experience. Okay, this is Sirach or Ecclesiasticus, chapter 34. I'm going to start at verse 9. It says, a man that have travailed knoweth many things. Travail going into, obstacles, trials. You travailed. You've been through an experience. You've been through things in life. You've seen things. You experienced things in life. It says, a man that have travailed knoweth many things, and he that have much experience will declare wisdom. He that have no experience knoweth little, but he that have travailed is full of prudence. When I traveled, I saw many things, and I understood more than I can express. I was oftentimes in danger of death, yet I was delivered because of these things. The spirit of those that fear the Lord shall live, for their hope is in him that saveth them. Whoso feareth the Lord shall not fear nor be afraid, for he is his hope. Blessed is the soul of him that feareth the Lord, to whom doth he look, in whom is his strength. For the eyes of the Lord are upon them that love him. He is their mighty protection and strong stay, a defense from heat and a cover from the sun at noon, a preservation from stumbling and a help from falling. And this is an understanding that comes through experience. And this understanding, forges a leader. This experience forges a true leader, one that understands the will of Yahweh Ba'ashim Yahushai, and not only understands the will of the Heavenly Father through his only begotten Son, but one who trusts in that understanding. When you go into warfare, you have generals, you have officers, you have soldiers, infantrymen. When you're waging a war, the war is first won or lost in the mind, in the understanding of a general, in the understanding of the leader and the men on the battlefield. If you go into that war with a losing mentality, that war is already lost, no matter how many resources you command, no matter how many men you command on the battlefield. If you go in with a lack of understanding, counting the ignorance more than the cause which bringeth the torment, then that battle is already lost. So the mindset of a leader is forged through experience, and the experience that we're gaining on a daily basis are all leading us to the understanding that Yahweh Bahasham Yahushai is all powerful. He's in the mix. All right. The Lord knows what he's doing, and he can take care of whatever our prospective circumstances may be. The Lord got this, and the victory has already been gotten because the victory has already been written, and we trust in what's written because what's written is a sure word. The scriptures speak about how we have a sure word of prophecy. The words of the Lord are sure, and we can bank on these words. We can bank on the understanding of Yahweh Ba'ashim Yahushai. And we're learning that on a deeper, more intricate level every single day through the experiences that the Lord is taking us through, which is forging brothers into leaders, proper leaders, real leaders who are going to be able to sustain in the time of trouble. Lord willing, we're the elect. We're going back. Matter of fact, let me get that in the GNT Bible too. Let me just see what that says. Let's see. This is Sirach or Ecclesiastes chapter 34 and verse 9 in the GNT. It says, a well-traveled person with wide experience knows many things and talks sense. You can't know much if you haven't experienced much, but travel can make you more clever. In my own travels, I have seen many things and learned more than I can put into words. I have been in danger of death many times, but I have always been able to escape by relying on past experience. Ooh. That's cold. Wow, that's cold. It says, those who fear the Lord will live because they have put their trust in the one who can save them. Fear the Lord and you will have nothing else to fear. If your trust is in him, you will never act like a coward. People who fear the Lord are fortunate because they know where they can look for help. The Lord watches over those who love him. He is their strong protection and firm support. He shelters them from the heat, shades them from the noonday sun, and keeps them from stumbling and falling. He makes them cheerful and puts a sparkle in their eyes. He blesses them with life and health. Which, hey, that's perfect. That's perfect. So we're gonna get back into the video.
Moral qualities of a leader. No amount of study or learning will make a man a leader unless he has the natural qualities of one. The qualities of a leader are well known to you and I shall deal with them further in my second lecture, so we'll get there. Here I will mention only the barest essentials. So it's interesting, he says that no amount of studying or learning will make a man a leader unless he has natural qualities. Here's what I've always said about that. Leadership is a skill, and you can certainly get better at it.
Which is true as well. Leadership is a skill that's being cultivated within each and every one of us. And every day we're getting better at our own abilities to lead, in our own lives,
If you were going for the NBA and you're only 5'8", is any amount of practice going to make you 6'4"? No. If you're a leader and you have a certain God-given ability with speech, you can get better at it, but you may not have the ability to be Martin Luther King or John F. Kennedy when you speak. That's the way it is.
And that goes into the gifts, that are being presented amongst the body from the spirit of Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushai. We each and every one of us have our own respective gifts. You have some brothers who are very gifted when it comes to exhortation. Some brothers who are very gifted when it comes to the history, or prophecy, or breaking things down in a very Similac form. You have brothers with different gifts. Like it says, and let's first get this in Sirach or Ecclesiastes chapter 17 and verse 30, because every brother has a gift. We all don't have every single gift. Every single gift is not contained within just one brother. It's a Sirach or Ecclesiastes 17 and verse 30. For all things cannot be in men, because the Son of Man is not immortal. So all things can't be in just one man. That's why the Lord set up the body. All right. That's why the Lord set up the ministry the way that it's set up. So that we can play upon each other's strengths and help to strengthen each other's weaknesses. This is Ephesians chapter 4. And let me get it on the screen. I got it on my regular Bible. Let me get it on the screen. This is Ephesians chapter 4. And I'm going to start at verse 11. All right, it says, And he gave some apostles and some prophets and some evangelists and some pastors and teachers for the perfecting of the saints, for the work of the ministry, for the edifying of the body of Hamashiach, till we all come into the unity of the faith and of the knowledge of the Son of God. So each gift that a brother has been given is all working toward that singular goal. All right, the unity of the faith and the knowledge of Yahushua. It says, unto a perfect man, unto the measure of the stature of the fullness of Hamashiach, till we henceforth be no more children tossed to and fro, carried about with every wind of doctrine, by the sleight of men and cunning craftiness, whereby they lie in wait to deceive. So every gift was given to each brother, strategically, so that we all might be able to strengthen each other, and play upon each other, feed off of one another. So he was right. Leadership is a skill, and that skill is able to be cultivated, as we practice, certain things. You may be very gifted, for example, in history. You might be weak, when it comes to the prophecy, but further studying on that skill that you're weak at can lead to a greater capability. You have brothers who have been set in place, elders, apostles, bishops, who have been set in place to help us in these different areas where we're weak in, so that we come up on a level, because you're only as strong as your weakest link. Each brother really isn't a weak link. You may be weak at one point in time in one area, but over time, through the experience that the Lord allows us to get, we become strong in every area. We become capable, functional in every area. We become a force in every area.
Martin Luther King or John F. Kennedy when you speak. It just, that's the way it is. So, but can you get better? Yes, you can certainly get better. And there's so many little qualities that a leader's supposed to have or should have, and you can make all of them a little bit better. And so if you make all of them a little bit better, you can improve as a leader. So you may not have the gift of being 6'4" to be in the NBA, but you can still be Steph Curry. What's Steph Curry? 6'1"?
I don't know.
Okay. Whatever he is, or Muggsy Bogues, who's 5'3", I think.
I don't know.
And he played in the NBA.
Yeah.
So, but he did it through a different approach and massive skills. So you can become a leader by utilizing and studying and learning the skills of leadership, as long as you have the most important one, which is humility.
And that is the most important part of a leader. The most important quality of a leader is humility. The scriptures speak about how humility comes before honor. And that's in Proverbs 15. This is Proverbs 15:33. It says, the fear of the Lord is the instruction of wisdom, and before honor is humility. So before one can become honored, before one can be honored as a good leader, you must possess humility. You must be able to humble yourself before the teachings of those who are greater than you. In that case being, in our case, that being our elders and apostles, alongside chiefly Yahushua. We have to humble ourselves to the order that the Heavenly Father has set, because amongst that order is the spirit of Yahushua, which is how we grow. It's how we grow.
Going on. He says he's going to talk about the barest essentials. He must have character, which simply means he knows what he wants and has the courage and determination to get it. He should have a genuine interest in and a real knowledge of the raw material of his trade. And most vital of all, he must have what we call the fighting spirit, the will to win. You all know and recognize it in sport. The man who plays his best when things are going badly, who has the power to come back at you when apparently beaten, and who refuses to acknowledge defeat.
And that gets into Proverbs as well. Righteous man. This is Proverbs 24:16. For the just man falleth 7 times and riseth up again, but the wicked shall fall into mischief. All right, that's that fighting spirit. All right, the will to win, the will to get better, the will to constantly improve and to constantly abound in the spirit of Yahushua. All right, that's that fighting spirit. For a just man falleth 7 times and riseth up again. A king doesn't wallow in his failures. A leader, a king, improves upon his failures. He builds upon his failures. And that's what the Lord is teaching us to do. All right, to build and improve upon the different shortcomings that we may have in our journeys. Not to be destroyed by them. Going into 2nd Esdras, the 14th chapter, casting off that weak nature, setting aside the thoughts that are most heavy unto thee.
There is one other moral quality I would stress as the mark of a really great commander, as distinguished from the ordinary general. He must have a spirit of adventure, a touch of the gambler in him. As Napoleon said, if the art of war consisted merely in not taking risks, glory would be at the mercy of very mediocre talent. Napoleon always asked if a general was lucky. What he really meant was, is he bold? A bold general may be lucky, but no general may be lucky unless he is bold. The general who allows himself to be bound and hampered by regulations is unlikely to win in battle. So again, there it is. We think we're looking for that disciplined, rigid individual that's going to follow all the rules, but we literally can't be bound or hampered by rules and regulations. And
those rules and regulations, really essentially going to the bounds that Esau has set. We're bold in Yahushua, as we are to be, pursuing Ephesians the 6th chapter. All right, 6 and 19. We're bold in the preaching of Yahushua. We're not bound by the rules and regulations of modern day theology and religion. We're bold in the message that we've been sent to preach, from on high.
Really like the idea of wins. Those are kind of some of the Brit saying. My daughters speak Spanish. Sense knowledge of what is Spanish accent. They just do it as pure gringos, and it's pretty funny to listen to. What we call common sense, knowledge of what is and what is not possible. It must be based on a really sound knowledge of the mechanism of war, i.e., topography, movement, and supply.
And that's it, really. He had another segment going into how leaders must exercise proper judgment, that I wanted to get into, but I think it's in a different area, a different timestamp in the clip I can't find.
Man, maybe we should just do this. Oh, yeah, that's a good point. You know what I mean? Tactics as most people think. It is the lack of this knowledge of the principles and practice of military movement and administration themselves, which can be apprehended in a very short time. So, and it's the same thing with business too. Like the logistics of business.
Yeah, it's in a different timestamp. But the point is been driven through the spirit. The makings of a leader are forged through experience. And we undertake that experience every single day. Every day is a new experience, another experience, and another opportunity at exercising judgment, at exercising the things that we read, which is important. One of the most important things is the ability to exercise what we read, apply what we read, apply Yahushua to our lives. That is one of the most important aspects of this truth of ours. Not just the putting on, but the actual embodiment of the word. But with that being said, Lord, when it's edifying unto you elect, I want to give all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahushua, Bahasham Rukakwadash, and double honors to our apostles and elders of Great Millstone who rule well in grace and peace to you elect around the four winds, believing and pushing this truth in all sincerity. May the blessing of election be upon your houses. Shalom. Stay up.